I was sorting through a tray of worn sockets and Allen wrenches when my neighbor leaned against the doorframe and asked, "It's always so quiet over here. You hardly have visitors. What do you even do all day?" I wiped a smear of old grease from my thumb, set down a torque wrench, and looked at him. I didn't feel the need to defend myself. I just nodded toward the workbench and said, "I'm tuning." Most people hear that word and picture a mechanic hunched over an open hood, listening to a sputtering V6, chasing a misfire with a stethoscope and a diagnostic scanner. They picture urgency. They picture noise. But real tuning doesn't happen when an engine is screaming at full throttle. It happens when it's brought down to its natural rhythm. You shut off the accessories. You let it idle. You listen past the exhaust note to the underlying harmonics. You adjust the mixture. You check the timing. You remove friction before you ever think about adding power. That's what I'm doing now. Not fixing what's broken, refining what's already running. For 42 years, my life operated on a different principle. I worked out of a bay that smelled of brake fluid and ozone. The fluorescent lights hummed. Phones rang off the wall. Customers wanted everything faster, cheaper, louder. I spent decades translating panic into work orders. I learned how to read a driver's face the moment they pulled in. The white-knuckle grip on the steering wheel, the frantic tapping on the dashboard, the way they apologized for a knocking sound they'd ignored for 3 months. I knew how to pull a transmission, how to machine a cylinder head, how to balance a drive shaft until the vibration disappeared at 70 miles per hour. I was good at my job because I understood that machines don't care about your schedule. They care about alignment. They care about clearance. They care about operating within their design parameters. Push them past the red line long enough, and the metal fatigues. The gaskets blow. The system tears itself apart from the inside. Human bodies obey the same laws. We just pretend they don't. We've been sold a narrative that equates constant motion with vitality. We're told to pack the weeks, to answer every invitation, to keep the social calendar full as proof of relevance. We're praised for how much we can endure, the overlapping commitments, the back-to-back obligations, the emotional toll of performing availability for people we barely know. And somewhere along the line, we mistake exhaustion for purpose. We confuse a racing pulse with a healthy heart. But if you've ever stood beside a properly rebuilt engine, you know the truth. A well-tuned motor doesn't prove its worth by shaking the garage door off its hinges. It proves it by running smooth at low RPMs. It idles cleanly. It responds without hesitation. It doesn't overheat. It just works, quietly, exactly as it was designed to. I'm 74 now. My joints tell the weather. My hands carry the permanent map of slipped wrenches and hot manifolds. My hearing is slightly muffled on the left from years of impact tools and open header testing. I don't need to pretend I'm built for the same load I carried at 30. Nobody does. Yet the moment you slow down, the moment you decline a dinner you never wanted to attend, the moment you choose to stay in your own space and listen to the ceiling fan cycle instead of navigating a crowded restaurant, people look at you like you've surrendered. They assume the quiet means you've stopped functioning. They don't understand that you finally learned how to measure. When I close the garage door and step into the house, the temperature drops. The draft moves differently here. It carries the faint smell of old paper, lemon wood polish, and the dried lavender my wife used to keep in a ceramic bowl near the entryway. I don't have a calendar on the refrigerator. I have a notebook with a leather cover, and most of the pages are blank. That's not an oversight, it's a specification. A blank page means the system isn't forced into a cycle it didn't design itself. It means the timing is adjustable. It means I can decide in real time what requires attention and what can wait until tomorrow. There's no penalty for holding position. In fact, holding position is often the most precise thing you can do. You know that feeling I'm talking about. It arrives on a Thursday evening or a Saturday morning when someone asks you to join them for an event you've already mentally rejected 3 times. You feel the weight of it in your chest, not because you're antisocial, not because you've lost your spark, but because your internal timing has shifted. You've spent decades running on rich mixture, compensating for other people's deadlines, covering for misfires in teams, families, communities, workplaces. You've kept the engine turning when it wanted to cool. You've carried the load. And now, when the opportunity to idle presents itself, you panic. You think idling means stalling. You mistake a lowered idle speed for a dying system. But listen to me. A smooth idle is not a sign of decay. It's the baseline of readiness. It's the state from which all reliable operation begins. The world outside the driveway doesn't care about your timing. It only cares about output. Every invitation, every committee, every casual lunch with acquaintances who treat conversation like a transaction demands a certain RPM. Some cost you 200. Some demand 4,000. Very few ask for less than 1,000. And when you're running on finite compression, when your valve lash has tightened, when the oil film is thinner than it used to be, those high RPM demands don't build character. They strip bearings. They glaze rings. They create heat that the cooling system can't dissipate. You come back from those gatherings feeling heavy. Your shoulders lock. Your thoughts scatter. You need hours of stillness just to bring the temperature back to operating range. That's not weakness. That's physics. You're not broken. You're running a system that finally respects its own tolerances. My neighbor came back last week. He stood on the grass, hands in his pockets, talking about a classic car meetup at the county fairgrounds. He said it would do me good to get out. He said sitting at home would make me rusty. I poured 2 glasses of iced tea. I handed him one. I didn't argue. I didn't recite a schedule. I just said, I'm not sitting, I'm calibrating. He laughed, but I saw the hesitation in his eyes. He doesn't know how to measure stillness because nobody taught him to. We're trained to equate noise with progress. We think silence is a vacuum that needs filling. But silence isn't empty. It's diagnostic. When you remove the interference, when you shut off the alternator of obligation, you finally hear what the system is telling you. You hear the knock before it cracks a piston. You feel the drag before it burns a belt. You notice the hesitation before it becomes a breakdown. That awareness doesn't happen in a packed venue. It happens in a room where the air moves slowly, where the light falls the same way it did yesterday, where you know exactly which floorboard will sigh when you step on it. There's a profound economy in staying home, but not the kind people usually mean. It's not about hoarding pennies or avoiding gasoline. It's about resource allocation. Every hour outside the house requires friction compensation. You adjust your posture to uncomfortable seating. You filter your speech to match the room's expectations. You navigate unpredictable traffic, sudden weather, mismatched temperaments, surface-level conversations that drain more than they return. That's not living. That's idling in gear. You're burning fuel while going nowhere. When I stay in, my consumption drops to what sustains. I read until my eyes grow heavy. I sharpen a chisel. I watch the dust settle on the windowsill. I let my thoughts run through the carburetor without forcing a choke. The mind clears. The breathing deepens. The nervous system stops treating every sound like an emergency. You stop compensating for a world that doesn't require you to run at wide open throttle. People confuse solitude with abandonment. They think choosing your own space means you've cut the lines to the rest of the world. But a properly tuned engine doesn't isolate itself from the drivetrain. It just stops fighting the transmission. It sinks. It finds its groove. I still see people, just differently. A former apprentice stops by on Sundays. He sits on a milk crate. We don't fill the air with chatter. He watches me clean carburetor jets with compressed air and a brass brush. He drinks his coffee. I wipe down a manifold. We talk maybe twice. Once about a stubborn throttle plate. Once about the price of copper gaskets. Then he leaves. That interaction doesn't exhaust me. It grounds me. It respects the clearance between us. It doesn't demand performance. It honors the fact that some connections run best at low load. Look at your own schedule. If it's a wall of overlapping commitments, if your days feel like a chain of obligations you didn't design, you're not living. You're redlining. You're forcing a system past its governor, and the longer you hold it there, the more you'll interpret normal fatigue as failure. You'll think you need more stimulation when what you actually need is recalibration. You'll buy into the myth that doing less means becoming less. But I've spent a lifetime listening to metal breathe. I know what happens when you let a hot block cool gradually versus dousing it in cold water. One preserves the seal. One cracks the casting. Your nervous system works the same way. You don't heal by adding stress. You heal by removing it. You don't find clarity by filling the void. You find it by letting the void settle. I'm not telling you to withdraw from life. I'm telling you to stop mistaking friction for traction. There's a difference between moving forward and spinning in place. One requires alignment. The other just burns rubber. When you finally give yourself permission to step off the assembly line, to leave the calendar blank, to sit in a room where the light moves at its own pace, something shifts. The shoulders drop. The jaw unclenches. The breath reaches the bottom of the lungs instead of catching at the collarbone. You remember things you thought you'd lost, a conversation from 30 years ago, the exact shade of a summer sky, the sound of a voice you haven't heard in decades. Memories don't surface when you're rushing to find your keys. They surface when the engine is quiet, when the intake is clean, when there's space for the mixture to form properly. That's not nostalgia. That's retrieval. That's your system running as it was meant to. You don't owe anyone a performance to prove you're still operational. You don't need to fill your weekends with activities you tolerate to satisfy people who measure worth by attendance. You can simply say no. Not with an excuse, not with a medical disclaimer, not with a fabricated appointment, just with a clear, calm refusal. I'm staying in today. That's it. That's the full sentence. There's dignity in that. There's precision. It's the verbal equivalent of setting a torque spec and stopping when the wrench clicks. No more, no less. You've already spent decades proving you can carry weight. You don't need to keep loading the chassis to show it still holds. Your home isn't a pit stop. It isn't a temporary shelter between obligations. It's the primary housing for your calibrated life. Everything inside it aligns to your tolerances. The chair supports the exact curve of your spine. The light falls where it doesn't strain your eyes. The temperature matches what your joints require. The silence doesn't demand explanation. It just operates. That's not stagnation. That's specification. You built it through years of labor, compromise, early mornings, late nights, missed vacations, covered shifts, paid dues. You earned the right to let it run on its own timing. So I'm handing you the wrench, not to fix anything, just to loosen what's over-tightened. Cancel the gathering that feels like a tax. Leave the invitation unanswered if it drains you. Sit in the room where the air moves slowly. Listen to the ceiling fan cycle. Watch the dust drift in the afternoon light. Let your idle speed find its natural rhythm. Don't apologize for it. Don't defend it. Just maintain it. If this resonates with you, if you've spent years running rich and finally want to lean out the mixture, drop a line in the comments. Tell me where your system runs smoothest. Is it a corner desk with morning light? A porch with a specific view? A workbench where your hands know exactly where each tool lives? Share it, not to compare, to calibrate. We're building a quiet network here, people who understand that stillness isn't absence, it's alignment. If you want more of this, if you value a perspective that measures life by timing instead of output, subscribe. Leave a like so it reaches others who are tired of running in the red. We don't need to prove we're alive by shaking the walls. We prove it by running clean, by idling smooth, by knowing exactly when to hold position. Until next time, keep your timing set, keep your mixture lean, and stay home when the system tells you to.